The film begins with a woman named Nak, who is pregnant. One night, Nak feels a lot of pain in her stomach. She is alone in her house, with no one to help her. Then, she tries to find someone to assist her. In a different place, there are army barracks with wounded soldiers. Inside the barracks, 5 friends named Mak, I, Tur, Pwak, and Shin are trying to stay hopeful. At that time, T gets into an argument with his friends because he is tired of the war. Everyone is starting to feel hopeless. Soon after, Pwak tries to lift everyone's spirits by telling the story of King Leonidas, who fought with 300 soldiers. Tur then points out that they all died in the end, and it's clear that Pwak didn't know how the story ended. Despite this, Pwak keeps trying to encourage his friends, and eventually, everyone in the barracks feels motivated again. They all return to the battlefield with renewed energy. Unfortunately, being motivated wasn't enough to win the war. Their weapons were old and not very good, so they started losing the battle and fell one by one. Eventually, the 5 friends gather in a trench to protect themselves from enemy attacks. They have almost given up hope, except for Mak. Mak is determined to survive so he can go home to his wife, Nak. Every day, Nak waits anxiously for Mak to come home. She stands by the river, holding their child and calling out Mak's name, P-Mak. There's something strange about the other villagers' behavior. They seem worried as night approaches, and no one dares to leave their homes when it gets dark. Mak's 5 friends decide to visit him in Prakanong, where he lives. Mak is still in pain from a bullet wound he got during the war. Even I is surprised that Mak survived such a serious injury. When they arrive in Prakanong, Mak notices that something is wrong. The village is quiet, and no one is out and about. As night falls, Mak finally reaches his house and reunites with Nak. He introduces her to his friends, and Pwak seems impressed by Nak's beauty. Since it was getting late, Tur asks if they can stay the night, and Pwak is excited about the idea. Mak invites them to stay in his late aunt's house, which is across from his own. Mak is actually very scared of ghosts, and whenever Nak teases him with ghost stories, he always hides behind her. The next morning, when they wake up, Tur sees a boat passing by with the bodies of fallen soldiers. And Shin, who is also afraid of ghosts like Mak, feels something is off in the village, especially with Nak. Shortly after, they decide to go shopping at the village market, but the villagers act strangely. They seem afraid of Mak and refuse to sell anything to him. Mak is confused by their behavior. Finally, Mak meets Aunt Preek, who tells him that Nak actually died during childbirth, and their child didn't survive either. Hearing this, Mak becomes very confused and troubled. In the evening, I, Tur, Pwak, and Shin were talking about what happened at the market earlier that day. Shin said that if you want to see if someone is a human or a ghost, you should stand with your legs apart and look at the person between your legs. Since Shin was the only one who wasn't drunk, the others asked him to call Nak so they could all talk together. Before this, Shin had fallen asleep and dreamed that he was asked to call Mak. When Shin got to Mak's house, he was shocked. The house was a mess, like it hadn't been taken care of for a long time. Scared, Shin quickly went back to where his friends were staying. Even though his friends were drunk, Shin told them that Nak was a ghost. But his friends didn't believe him. The next day, the 5 friends were helping with some community work. And Terrace, who was usually lazy, decided to help. When Terrace climbed up to Mak's house, he saw the same messy house that Shin had described. He started to think that Shin might be telling the truth. Remembering what Shin had said about looking between his legs, Tur tried it, but when he looked at Nak, nothing strange happened. Soon after, Tur told Shin, and Shin was surprised that the method didn't work. Later, Tur went into the forest. There, he found a strange mound of dirt and realized there was a body buried underneath. Terrified, Tur ran away but accidentally disturbed a beehive. At that moment, he got stung all over his face and couldn't explain what he had seen in the forest. When Terrace was trying to explain the truth about Nak, Mak and Pwak came over to him. At that time, Tur was too scared to say anything directly, so he tried to find another way to make his friends understand. He decided to write down what he wanted to say. When Pwak, Shin, and I read what it had written, they were all shocked because Tur wrote that Nak was actually a ghost. Mak saw the paper that Tur wrote on and was surprised. When he asked Nak about it, he seemed a little upset, but then they hugged each other. At the same time, Pwak, Shin, Tur, and I were watching them from Mak's aunt's house. When Shin read Ter's note again, it didn't say that Nak was a ghost anymore, but that she was bad. Even though earlier, it had said she was a ghost. That night, Aunt Preek's son, Ping, came to the house where Pwak and the others were staying. There, Ping told them that Aunt Preek had died because she told Mac the truth about Nak. Pwak and I got really scared for Ter and Shin, who were on their way to Mac's house to tell him the truth about Nak. Pwak and I quickly rushed to Mac's house to save their friends. When they were about to leave Mac's house, Nak stopped them and asked Mac to invite them to dinner. At the dinner table, everyone except Mac was shocked because all the food served was just dry leaves. But Nak and Mac seemed to enjoy the strange meal. In the end, the friends had no choice but to eat the dry leaves too. After dinner, they played charades. When it was Ter's turn, he tried to act out something, and everyone struggled to guess. Then Terrace pointed at Nak, and Shin innocently guessed, dead man's clothes. At first, everyone was happy because they had guessed the answer correctly. But a few seconds later, they realized what it actually meant. They all panicked and tried to run away, jumping into a boat. However, they were so scared that they rowed the boat in circles, right in front of Mac's house. Mac got angry and went to where his friends were staying. He kicked them out, thinking they were just like the villagers who said Nak was dead. Mac then took Nak to the night market. Nak wore a mask so no one would notice her. At that time, they both seemed very happy. But Mac's 4 friends were also at the market, hiding in a haunted house. They wanted to tell Mac the truth and tried to separate him from Nak. After they managed to get Mac away, they ran through the forest. But Mac insisted that his wife was still alive and wanted to go back to her. Shortly after, his 4 friends went looking for Mac. When they found him, Mac was covered in blood. Ter thought that Mac had actually died because his war injuries were so serious. Ter also remembered the body he had found buried in Mac's backyard and thought it was Nak's because the ring on the body was the same as her. But then Ter realized it was a wedding ring, and Mac could have worn it too. Then, Ter quickly checked Mac's hand and saw that he wasn't wearing the ring. Instead, Mac had it on a necklace around his neck. Ter then threw rice at Mac, and Mac screamed in pain. Scared, Ter and the others ran away, thinking that Mac was actually a ghost. Soon after, they took Nak and her child with them, trying to escape by boat. But on the way, the boat started to sink. In their panic, they threw away all their belongings, including the oars they were using to row. Moments later, Ter was scolded for throwing away all the oars. Then, he saw Mac across the river. Mac tried to swim over to them, but the river was too deep, and he almost drowned before finally climbing into the boat. There, Mac explained that the rice Ter threw at him got stuck in his gunshot wound, causing him pain. Since their boat was sinking, they decided to row with their hands. And Terrace, thinking I was the ghost because the ring was found near him, kicked him off the boat. But when Ter looked between his legs, he saw Nak's pale face, and she was holding Mac's shoulder, even though she was sitting far away. Panicked, they all jumped into the water and swam to shore, except for Shin, who couldn't swim. But out of fear, Shin ended up swimming very fast. At that time, Mac looked sadly at his wife. Even though he knew Nak was a ghost, he didn't want to leave her because he loved her so much. Soon after, Pwak had to knock Mac out, and they took him to a temple. The priest performed a ritual to get rid of the ghost. Nak then appeared, wanting to take back her beloved husband. In that moment, Mac didn't mind that Nak was a ghost because he still loved her deeply. In the chaos, the rice and holy water used in the ritual were spilled, and the priest's sacred thread was accidentally thrown in front of Nak. But then, Nak blew out all the candles, and when they relit, the 4 friends found themselves tangled in the sacred thread. The priest ran away in fear. As Pwak, Shin, and Ter were terrified of Nak, I suddenly came in, making them even more scared because they thought I had drowned and died. I reassured them that he wasn't a ghost. And Terrace, still suspicious, pushed Pwak, who was wet with the holy water, toward I. I then explained that he had taken the ring from the body buried in Mac's backyard because he needed money for gambling. However, they all soon realized that Nak was still standing right there, watching them. As they were trying to escape, all the doors and windows suddenly locked. When they noticed that Nak was missing, they saw that she had hanged herself from the ceiling of the temple. At that time, Ter and the others argued that Nak shouldn't be in this world anymore, but Nak only wanted to stay with Mac. She wanted Mac to go with her. Soon after, Knack reached out her hand towards Mac and apologized for lying to him. But Mac didn't feel betrayed because he already knew that Knack was a ghost. He just pretended not to know because he loved her so much and didn't want to be apart from her. Then, Mac once looked between his legs at Knack, and that's when he realized she was a ghost. But instead of running away, he threw away his protective amulet so that Knack wouldn't feel bothered by it. He even dug a grave behind his house, knowing it was Knack's. Mac was willing to eat dry leaves covered in caterpillars just because he loved her so much. Knack knew that their house was messy and abandoned, but Mac didn't care as long as he could stay with her. Suddenly, Knack cried when she heard Mac's story, which showed how much he wanted to be with her forever. She reminded him of his fear of ghosts, but Mac wisely said that even though he was scared of ghosts, he was more afraid of losing her. In the end, their friends agreed that Mac and Knack should stay together. So, they all decided to live happily together, including Pwack and the others. The film ends. The moral lesson from this film is sometimes, true love means being cool with your ghost spouse and eating some weird stuff. And remember, if you're scared of ghosts, just love them more than your fear.